Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast. I'm your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. The Designing Hollywood podcast is dedicated to all things movies, the movie industry, and its talented professionals. And our guest today, I gotta say, the projects he's worked on, I can't wait to talk to him. He's one of the film industry's premier makeup artists, with a career spanning over 30 years. Over the course of his rise to the top, Donald Mowat has earned 2 BAFTA nominations for Nocturnal Animals and BladeRunner 2049, as well as 5 Saturn nominations and 1 win for Prisoners. His resume includes credits on films like Three Kings, The Departed, The Fighter, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Skyfall, Nightcrawler, Sicario, Spectre, First Man, and Spider-Man Far From Home. He's also been the personal makeup artist on films for Mark Wahlberg, Daniel Craig, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Ryan Gosling. An incredibly impressive body of work. Next up for Mowat is Dune and the upcoming Marvel Cinematic Universe TV series Moon Knight that I've wanted to see, most of my life. So please give a warm welcome, clap at home for Mr. Donald Mowat. Donald, thank you so much for coming on to the Designing Hollywood podcast. It is such an honor to talk to you, sir.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for such a really lovely introduction, and everybody there, Marilyn, everybody who orchestrated this. Thank you for that. It's very kind of you.
Oh, are you kidding? I mean, it's my honor to speak with you. And I think, we've talked a little bit on this show about makeup, and I've always said that as a producer and people working in the industry, I always joke that the 3 most important hires on any movie, the first most important person is the caterer. But the second 2 people are your hair and makeup team.
Yeah.
I think the reason for that is obviously when you have world-renowned celebrities, actors, actresses working on a film, they need to know part of their toolbox before they get in front of the camera is to know that they look exactly how they want to look as they step out to inhabit the characters that they're inhabiting, which means that you have to have makeup and hair people, especially makeup people, that are known and trusted by the actors because you have an intimate relationship with the people that you're working with. And I mean, you're literally working on people's faces. And I'm curious, how did you begin your career as a makeup artist?
It's really interesting because sometimes when I think back, I mean, now that I'm getting to this point where I'm talking about being of a certain age in the industry, you past this 30-year mark, and think, what is it? What have I learned over the 35 years actually? And I start to really underestimate things and go, wow, there was like what you've said. I mean, there's certain things, the caterers, obviously, transport,
right.
When I look back in the big things, we've sort of given the wrong prizes to the wrong people for the better part of 50 years. But everyone sort of we get it, we understand. But what I've learned about the business is essentially how much it's changed, not always for the good. How the business fragmented so much, how, we used to work much more as a unit, a costume, makeup, hair, in that order of, I don't even want to say precedence or importance, but I mean, you take your lead from the costume designer, who takes their lead from the production designer. It was a way we worked that was really, so I guess what I'm trying to say in a long-winded way, when I started, I think the hierarchy of the industry was clearer. If that makes sense. And I knew what I was there for, but a lot of other people didn't know what I was there for. I mean, the actors always knew and the designers knew, but people on the crew were like hair and makeup, like what are they? They called us the vanities or the beauty, it was sort of derogatory, and it was sort of slightly like a necessary evil. And I think also as a man, you spend a lot of your earlier, as a younger man going, well, people don't really respect it. I think you fight for a lot of respect as a man in the industry. I mean, it's my hashtag moment maybe, and people will be upset to say it, but there is a moment in the film industry where certain departments get better treatment. And I guess what I'm really trying to get at is, as a makeup artist, you really had to earn it. You had to really know what you were doing and be
Yes.
able to convey a confidence and let an actor know, I'm not just some guy who puts eyeliner on. I'm a filmmaker. I am a serious filmmaker, just like the DP,
Yep.
just like the sound mixer. And I think that that has made me a little bit, not bitter, but a little bit like, come on, look at what we actually do. The work is on the screen. You're in, as you say, a proximity of the actor, whether it's a world famous superstar or somebody who's been in community theater. You're working in this personal space. But no other department is working in that intimacy, in the eye, the close contact, eye to eye. You have to know what you're doing.
Yes.
And you have to convey confidence towards the actor and the director that I'm not, because I've witnessed it. I've been part of it where people think, oh God, makeup. And you think, actually, it's kind of important. And people start to see it when they recognize that you are good at what you do, and that the other people, like the actor or the director or the costume designer, go, wait a second, we need to talk about the makeup. It's a very important part of this film. And I think for that, I'm always thankful, but also I wished we talked more about it years ago, that people didn't have to be kind of annoying. Like, look at me, look what I do, in order to be noticed or respected in an industry that was not always good to behind the scenes talent.
Well, I think one of the things that people forget, like for those who've never been on sets, and I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this haven't been, before every shot on a film, you have makeup and hair people doing last looks. I mean, for every shot. And an actor's face is their canvas, and that's what they're conveying. And, for everybody, you need makeup and a consistency in the way somebody looks is incredibly important. And when you're shooting a 12-hour day, a person has to look, if you're shooting, say, if it's one scene or if it's one area or if it's one set, they have to look the same in every shot. And you might do 50 setups or 60 setups in a day, and every piece of coverage has to look the same. And this is something that is incredibly important. And I'm also a film editor, and I've had to cut around in my low budget career when makeup isn't consistent. So, and when you're working, like you said, in close quarters, you're literally working on the faces of people that are going to be writ large on the big screen, 40 feet high. And if that makeup, if you don't know exactly what you're doing with color, with foundation, a makeup artist can ruin a shot. And the relationship you have with an actor and a director of photography and understanding how light and shadow works on someone's face, I mean, this is vital. This is vital for the look of the film, and it's vital for the actor, isn't it?
Well, it is. I'm so glad. Well, because you've got a background in filmmaking as an editor, as special effects, makeup. Yes, but a lot of people don't, and I think that's where I think in educating people now, new people coming into the industry, what I've noticed is more and more people have fractured and separated into their own kind of niche field where I do this, you do that, and they don't really think of the overall picture. But I really think it's, for my crew, I really instill the belief that we're all working together. If the costume is this and the makeup is that and the hair is this, it's cohesive, it works. Sometimes you take one thing. I don't think you always have to have a makeup, costume, and hair element. I think you might need one or two, or costume and makeup, or costume and hair. I rarely think it's makeup, costume, and hair. But having said that, I think a lot of the newer people, as I've got some great new up and coming people who do get it. They're filmmakers. I think that the consistency, I'm so glad you brought it up. Continuity in makeup is one of the hardest things to maintain. If you're on a film for 6 months or 3 months and it takes place over 2 nights, you gotta make them look the same. It's really hard in a person's life when you look at someone over the course of 4 months, whether they've had a cold, a fever, a cold sore, a pimple, lost weight, gained weight. It's very hard to maintain that. We just learn how to do it. But I think the audience will often forget, like, these people are doing, very few people have that precision in what they do. A focus puller certainly does, but almost no one else does in terms of precision and in terms of your mind working at a level that I'm able to observe. I don't have to look at a picture the way people think we do it, because you sort of know when you're doing it on the person's face. I can tell when they look a bit different. They're a bit puffy or tired, or how to maintain beard, which is really a huge thing in films. People don't ever think twice about how you actually maintain that. So glad you brought it up. As far as continuity is everything in a film, and it's why there's a script supervisor to make sure.
Yeah, and I think something else that is not to be forgotten. You were there in the transition from film to digital capture, and the way people looked, quote unquote, on video. Let's call it digital capture now, because it's not just video. But that was a change as well. The kind, how thick makeup needed to be on faces, and that was a whole transitional point for the industry. And was that a difficult transition to make for you? I mean, you had 25 years experience working on films before digital capture technology became the norm. Did you have to sort of relearn what you had learned over the decades?
You know, when people started talking about HD, which was digital, I mean, that whole thing, there was a kind of a, I don't want to say a paranoia. There was this frenzy of information that came as we were transitioning into the world of digital. Yes, we all worried, we panicked, but what somebody said to me later was, there was a brand of makeup we used to love to use. It's not around anymore, unfortunately, called Visiora, which was designed by a French cameraman, a cinematographer. Visiora, made by Christian Dior. It was the greatest makeup that ever existed. I don't care who's listening. No one made a better foundation makeup. And the reason it was so good is it was made expressly for the film industry, for cinema, by a cinematographer. Right. It had every element. It was the right numbers anyway. But what I learned was, when everybody went kind of a little bit hysterical, and there was this thing of HD. My first job, really HD digital, was with David Fincher on The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Well, can you imagine that transition when you think, oh my God, here we go? And I'd finished a film with Daniel Craig in New Mexico. And then here I was working digital on Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And I realized, also as a makeup artist, as a designer, you suddenly are falling victim to all these people. It was a bit like COVID. All these things people were saying, listening, going, wait a second. I just do good makeup. Let's just do good makeup, appropriate for the character. How about that? And as I met David Fincher the first time, I was a little bit defensive, thinking he is Mr. Techno. He's the guy. Everyone says David Fincher is the most technically savvy director producer in Hollywood. And that's probably true, maybe next to Chris Nolan. And he's wonderful. And I met him and I thought, oh my God, he's going to put me through it. I don't like reds. I don't like this. And I'm doing a makeup test with Daniel Craig. And I did the makeup and I just went, you know what? I know how to do this. And I did what I had to do. And the character has an evolution, and he gets beat up and strangled, and all these things happen. And I just did. And David just looked at me and he said, so Donald, are you going to track all this beard? Like, is that going to be a problem? What do you think? No, it's not a problem. I'll figure it out. What about this? What about the cut? What about, no problem. And I said, you know, I was a little bit HD, and he goes, digital. And I thought, okay, digital. He's right. Why am I saying HD like a fool? Learn what the new technology is. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life, working with David Fincher and Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara on The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. HD, digital, not so bad. And then Roger Deakins really introduced me to it on Skyfall, where I love it now. And I'm, in fact, I don't know if I need to go back to 35 millimeter film.
Right. I mean, there's not a lot of people that are. Well, that brings up, since you brought up directors of photography, do you consult with directors of photography before you begin? Because obviously working on, you've worked on some films, Roger Deakins obviously a couple of times. and
Oh,
he
that's
won. You were there when you worked on the project where he finally won that Oscar, that long overdue Oscar for Blade Runner 2049, which he should have won for Skyfall too. But um, uh, is there? Do you consult with them? Because, like you said, that great foundation was actually made by a cinematographer. So, what is your relationship with the DP?
Well, I think it should be. I wish more people would or felt comfortable. It goes both ways. The makeup artist, the HOD, the designer, and the cinematographer. It's a two-way street. I think that there has to be a mutual somehow working together. It used to be that way, and then we lost it for a while. I'm not sure what happened. Um, when I met Roger, so long story short, Roger Deakins is why I work with Denis Villeneuve,
Mm.
because Roger introduced me to Denis after Skyfall when they were looking for a makeup HOD for prisoners. So that's Roger's doing. On Skyfall, we had some challenges with makeup for Daniel. They were doing something, we wanted to do something different. The Bond franchise had never really made Bond look quite so exhausted and put through, and it was very scary for me and quite frightening challenge for both Daniel and myself. And Roger was fantastic because he's the real deal. He's a cinematographer extraordinaire. We were going to make this character more, I don't know, somehow more based in reality than they've ever seen. And that's what I love. And so I guess Emily Blunt called me not that long ago and said, you know, Donald, nobody's better at making somebody look terrible than you. And I took it as the greatest compliment, coming from Emily Blunt, who's a great beauty of our time and our industry. And I embraced it because I thought I really helped Daniel work on that film where we could see this vulnerable side to Bond. And then, of course, he turns up in the navy blue Tom Ford tuxedo, Johnny Tamin's in Richard's work, and he comes up in that boat and he looks back to Bond, with the tan in a can kind of thing, after being all scruffy and blue. And I was very proud of it because I thought that's a moment people always talk about. And I was very proud to work with Daniel, who's so lovely, and Sam Mendes and Roger, who lit it. And Roger basically lets you do what you need to do. And so, yes, I do collaborate and I try. And I'm very sad when I hear people tell me that the directors of photography are not interested in makeup or what they're doing. And I think that saddens me as far as what the business has become if people can't work with each other.
No, I mean the whole, what I've loved about filmmaking is, to me, it's the great art form. It's the great collaborative art form, and everybody's, it's the one place where you get, first of all, the best people in the world coming together for the most part, doing incredible work. And I think obviously when you don't have that harmonious sort of synergistic relationship on a set, it's not good for anyone. Because I think, like you said, the real filmmakers that understand, they know a director of photography needs to rely on his makeup people to know. I mean, the way someone's face is lit is really important, and that becomes part of the entire. I don't know, the look of a movie. Like you said, you have to make James Bond in Skyfall look tired. Well, that becomes part of a DP's job, the makeup people's job, costume, everybody, and this is what shows up on screen. And to have that relationship, I think one of the interesting things about this podcast, the Designing Hollywood podcast, is truly the design elements in a film. You've got the art department, you've got makeup, you've got costumes, and you've got the director of photography, and then of course the director as well, creating something that is supposed to work together. So every single shot in a film tells you what you need to know about the story that's being told. Like you said, you're all filmmakers. You're just working in different aspects of the art. And what I was going to ask you too, what I find fascinating, because I've never heard the answer to this, you have worked with a lot of the same actors. Obviously, you have great relationships with the people you've worked with, whether it's Daniel Craig, whether it's Jake Gyllenhaal or Ryan Gosling. How does that begin? Like, when you meet an actor for the first time, where does that conversation about the character, where does that begin for you? And how do you develop that rapport with an actor where they begin to trust you, and then you can both work together to create the character?
Well, I think everybody is fundamentally different. We all are. And I think every actor is different, although some people think they're all the same. They're not really. I mean, on a certain level, we all are the same in the sense of how we work in the industry. But I find a lot of actors, I don't pay too much credence or too much attention to anything I hear prior.
Right.
Because every department has a different experience, and we usually get them, the actors, a little bit later. So costume have the first fittings, et cetera, et cetera. They have a different relationship. It's personal but impersonal. It's all about the character. There's very little, and the intimacy is different. It's not as close range. So the person might be feeling a little freer. It might be different. A lot of body image things can come up, and that's already established. So I feel like by the time we meet, which is shortly after the whole, and I always like to go meet the costume designer, and I take my lead from them. I mean, they are setting the overall look, and there's no mistake in my mind of who comes first. I mean, it is a business of hierarchy, and I think it's important. And if I see the costume as one direction, I kind of get a sense right away. I know not to make it too makeup-y. It's the costume's done enough. When I get the actor, I kind of get a feeling right away. If it's an actor who's a little jumpy or unsure, they'll tell me, Donald, I don't know what to do here. What do you think? And quite often people will let me say what I think, what I'm thinking, but I never presume, ever, never, ever, ever have I ever presumed and given somebody an idea or a thought and said, this is what I think you should be doing.
Right.
I want to hear what they think, and this is what I suggest. And I think that's been the secret to being able to work with people numerous times. A lot of actors feel they're not listened to and not heard. And I'm very conscious of that because I felt that in my life, as we all have. If you feel, well, why aren't they listening to me? I want my makeup, or what do you think of my hair? And I do think a lot of actors are looking for a certain type of honesty, and that's very hard to come by in our industry sometimes. Where someone will say, well...
Why do you think that is, though? I mean, I've always sort of believed that the more open people are with one another, especially on a set, when everybody knows what's going on, because actors do want openness and honesty. They want a relationship. They want to be able to build their character with somebody and have it guided, or don't they?
I do. I think in principle we do, but we're all a bit. It's like saying to your best friend, "Do I look fat in this shirt?"
Right.
I mean, we all do it, and we all don't really want the answer because sometimes the answer is not good.
Sure.
We've all been, do I look fat in this? Is my hair okay? Should I shave to go to that meeting? Sometimes the truth hurts. Sometimes an idea is not good. Not that it's not a good idea. Some people will put you through and they'll be like, no, but I want to try. I mean, Jared Leto, I love using him as an example. I love Jared. I mean, he's put me through. He put me through it on Blade Runner. I tell everybody. And I love Jared for it because I really said to him, I think this is a mistake. If we do this, I think we need to try this. And Denis let me kind of lead how we do it. And he meets the actors before anybody. And he'll say, my guy who's running the makeup and the prosthetics and the hair, and he knows what he's doing. Listen to him. And that coming from Denis Villeneuve or from Roger or somebody, but especially from the director, it happened on Sicario, where he said, let him work it out a little bit. Sometimes people need that to hear that about you. And then they go, actually, I guess that's why he likes this guy. And some people need a little bit of leadership and maybe a little bit of, I don't want to say a dad or a mom, but I think sometimes people need to let you do what you know how to do. And the business has lost to some extent, to some degree. I think some of that's been lost a little bit because people want to stay in favor with people or not upset people or be the yes man. But we have enough yes men and women in this industry for a lifetime.
Yes, we do. Well, I mean,
why not just say to somebody, actually, if I were, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no. I was just gonna nod my head and say absolutely. But I mean, I would ask, like, on something like Sicario, you've got,
Mhm.
I mean, my God, what a cast! You've got Josh Brolin and you've got Benicio del Toro. You've got, as you said, the lovely Emily Blunt, and yet you got to mess them up. you know, I mean, the whole
Yeah,
point is
they were great. They were great. Emily was great because I think when I've seen her in other films, and she's an extraordinary actress, and I saw her in Young Victoria and the Devil Wears Prada. So you start to think, well, I don't really do that. That's not what I do. And then I meet her, and we spoke on the phone, and I think Denis had said to her, he's great. I really love him. And what a huge honor and privilege it is when a director says, because a lot of makeup, this is one thing people forget, directors choose costume designers, which is as it should be.
yes,
But a lot of directors don't get to choose the makeup. Often the actor or producer or studio. So I think some directors are quite frustrated. By the time they get to the makeup head of department, or a personal makeup artist, or hair and makeup designer, or whatever, or special effects makeup is often hired outside of being
sure,
in the realm of, which I don't agree with. I think I should do it. Is that you have so many people handling it. By the time makeup comes on, the director's like, oh, you're doing it. And they haven't had much interaction. So therefore, very few makeup artists or heads of department are really hired by the director anymore, which is really unfortunate.
mm, I
You
didn't know that.
know,
That's interesting.
and I think it's hard. Yeah, because when I started years ago, I mean, actually, all of us were hired by the production designer once upon a time. Way, way, way back, costume
Yeah.
designers included.
Well, one of the
And
things
I mean, I,
oh,
I
no, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say really briefly. I think what happened is when you get to work with a director who puts the emphasis on what he or she want in the look of the film from the makeup, whether it's the hair, makeup, HOD, or designer, or whatever, I think it puts the actors at ease, actually.
Mm,
And some actors will go, you know what? I'm going to work with your person. You think he's so great. And I think that was my relationship with Emily and Josh and Benicio on that film, because we made, I think, an extraordinary film that I'm
oh,
really proud of, that they are all
incredible.
proud of. And I love working with them every day. There is not a day I worked on that film, not once did I went, oh, screw this, I'm fed up, I'm tired, I'm hot, because it was hard. Not one day went by in 4 months that I ever felt like that on that film.
Yeah, I mean, I can
And that
only
doesn't
imagine.
happen.
Well, your credits, especially recently, you've worked on these monstrous projects with, like in the case of Dune, huge cast of actors. Blade Runner 2049, in terms of its design
Mhm.
work, a giant project. Spider-Man: Far From Home, and Skyfall. I'm curious, has the size of these projects and the fact that so often green screen is employed, has that changed your methodology over the years, working on
Mhm.
these large fantasy projects as opposed to, say, something more intimate like a Prisoners?
Well, I mean, Prisoners was a challenge. I mean, I can't lie. It was a very difficult, rewarding, challenging, creative, and wonderful people. But yeah, very different in the sense of small crew, like three makeup, two hair, maybe three,
Hmm.
couple of special people coming in and out, some additional people, very small makeup hair crew. On a very intense makeup film. I mean, and I will say Denis films are generally makeup intensive, whether even Sicario, but Prisoners, Blade Runner. So I think that I guess Blade Runner, particularly, I'd been working on Stronger with Jake and Tatiana in Boston when they called me to do Blade Runner, and I remember being terrified because I thought, why are they calling me? Why aren't they calling? I could list. some of my friends and colleagues, I thought, why aren't they calling those 10 people? Why me? And I called Denis up, I emailed him and I said, can I please speak with you? And he phoned me and he said, what's going on? And I said, what, like, why me? And he goes, why not you? You know, and I've explained that I'm terrified. And he goes, I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. And I thought, okay. And then I saw Roger and his wife James, and we had dinner and we talked about coming to Budapest to do Blade Runner 2049. And I started meeting the actors, and Roger's like, just make sure you bring la la la, and we're going to do this and do that. And everybody and his crew, amazing. He's got, I mean, his crew, focus puller, everybody, dolly grip, everyone, the DI. And we all kind of said, okay, well, that's what we're doing. We're all terrified, but we'll do it. And that's what we did. And I think we shared this thing. I remember the camera test, that set. The first time I saw that set with the rain, and Don Sparks, the first aide, he said, hey, Don, do you want to come and look how wet the set is? And I went, and Roger, the way he lit it was just jaw-dropping, extraordinary film set. I mean, nothing parallels the way Roger lights something like that. And you go, oh my God, I can't effing believe this.
Yeah.
Blade Runner 2049, there's Ryan Gosling, and we're trying to put it all together. And then it all seemed easy, as though you're working on a $5 million movie, like a Nightcrawler, where we don't have all of that, but we are working in a different way. So I think it's really about the people you're working with and the openness to being creative and spontaneous and daring. And what I love with Denis is we don't plan too much. We do it very last minute. And it'll be, what about this? Why don't we try bandages on Ryan's nose? Kind of, I don't know, an homage to Jack Nicholson in Chinatown.
Hence my
and we
shirt.
did it. And I thought, oh my God, are we? And it worked. Right? So
well, that brings
I think the daunting. Yes, yeah, please go ahead.
Well, the things that you've done, like for instance, the tattoos in like on prisoners, the finger tattoos, or the girl with the dragon tattoo. Just for my own edification, I've always wondered, like when you're doing stuff like that, does that come from production design? Do you work with that? Is it an actor's idea? Like what? How does all of that happen when there's things like tattoos?
In The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, to be fair, I really came on only to do Daniel. They had other people in place. And the costume designer, Trish Somerville, she designed most of the makeup and hair, along with Pat McGrath and Torsten and other people. I came on to do Daniel specifically, and I ended up doing some stuff on Rooney, special makeup, bruising, things like that. So the tattoos were already kind of pre-designed. With Jake on Prisoners, Jake and I did that. And I remember having to go to Denis to say, what do you think? And I don't think he loved it at first. I'm quite opposed to tattoos in films, just for the record, for a lot of reasons. And I just think, why? I mean, why? It's just been done so many times. You're like, enough already. Let's not have a tattoo and be creative. But, you know, Jake was right. Jake was right on that one. And he put the fingers on himself. He's so fantastic. I would do his face and the neck. Jake's a proper actor. He's been trained. He knows how to do things. So he doesn't want to sit in a makeup chair for an hour. So we're proactive. We do the hair, the makeup, all of it. It's a work in progress. And he is the most refreshing person to work with as an actor, because he's not looking to sit still and let somebody do everything. He wants to be a part of it. And I love it. And Denis just said, look, whatever, if we can clear all these Russian tattoos, and we couldn't clear one of them. So it doesn't end up in the film, but it was great. It was a great project to work on, because every character had something in that film.
Right.
And yeah. And I really, yeah.
Well, I think that kind of thing is where I think great makeup artists can shine. And, you know, when I go back to like Blade Runner, I wanted to ask you, with Blade Runner, you've obviously got human characters, you have replicant characters, you've got a holographic character. And how did you go about, and then of course Ryan Gosling gets the shit kicked out of him throughout that entire film. So he's getting beat up. Was that a fun project to take on? And in terms of the makeup design, did you have to do, like, were you and Denis coming up with things like, okay, this character is a replicant, or Jared Leto's character, Wallace, he's blind, and there was a lot of different things. Was that something that you spent a lot of time developing? Were there different looks between the humans and the replicants? Did you want to, I don't know, did you have conversations about, well, I wonder if replicants sweat as much as human beings do?
Yes. I'm so glad you bring this up, because this very same thing happened to me on First Man. But I don't want to muddle the two stories. On Blade Runner, I would often say to Roger, because we see each other outside of work, and James, his wife, who's very much part of the whole sort of team Deacons, and I would say, well, I mean, does a replicant have to look like this? And we'd all be kind of thinking, but it's a fantasy. And Roger said, well, it's a fantasy. And I would ask Denis, like, should Ryan be clean shaved and kind of beautiful and sort of perfect, like a Tom Ford model? And we all would ask ourselves, and then Ryan had a really interesting point. It's like, but we don't know. And then you find yourself asking yourself such bizarre questions as a human being. As a man, you kind of go, am I really thinking this through? And I'll occasionally call a very dear friend of mine who retired from the industry, who was an actress, and say, am I crazy? And she'll be, no, you're not at all crazy. It's good you're actually thinking like this. And Ryan came to me. We did some camera tests. The first couple of tests we did on Blade Runner, I don't think he loved his look. I think we had to work on it. We had to make it more grittier, more the way. I think Denis came to me one day and said, I don't know, are you doing? And I said, well, it's more Clint Eastwood. That's the way I'm seeing it. And Denis thought that was interesting. And Ryan thought it was very funny. And I went, well, I don't know what it is, but I think it's Clint Eastwood. It's a little bit dirty and grimy, but kind of sexy and macho and masculine, but whatever that is in a modern, whatever that is. And everybody was like, okay. And I loved how honest everybody could be. And Ryan did not want to be clean and perfect. So we increased the stubble. And then, can a replicant, well, we don't know. Is he a replicant? Everything's a fantasy. So I learned a lot from that experience. And the hologram with the pink on Joy was just getting
how did you do that?
Yeah.
What was that process like?
Well, try asking 5 different people what color pink is to them, and that'll bend your head around that one. What color is pink to you? Is it bubblegum pink? Is it come out of a baseball pack of cards? Is it bubblicious? Is it pink like this? I ran around for a week. So when I left LA, right before we started shooting, I went to the suppliers in North Hollywood, and I just went, what? And we thought, well, maybe it's not pink, maybe it's red. And the early artwork looked kind of red. And I thought she looked like a red version of Mystique and I called Denis and said, she looks like Mystique. He's like, what do you mean? I went, well, the artwork that your illustrator is doing looks like Mystique from X-Men. I think we're making a mistake. And her eye, and anyway, we started making contact lenses. I sent her for a fitting in North Hollywood. I just went into the suppliers and bought every color that I could think of as pink, imaginable. And then I thought, maybe go red and orange just for safety. And that's what we did. And we turned up, and I started doing tests, and we did one test. And I walked around the office and went to Roger and Denis and said, is this pink? Is this the color of pink you want? Yes, that's it. And that's how we ended up. We changed the wig from pink to that kind of bluey color because it needed some contrast. The contact lenses worked. I mean, it was a practical makeup. We painted it on. We did it twice. And people still to this day say to me, it's not makeup, that was all VFX. And I'm like, excuse me, I remember because I was there and we did it. And Joe McNeil, and myself and Sheila painted that on Anna Dharma standing up on a platform, painting her pink. But people think it's a VFX.
And then, of course, she has her different wig colors, and sometimes she's more opaque and real than other times when you can see through her. I mean, just a staggering. I mean, that character was amazing. I mean, actually, everything about Blade Runner 2049 is amazing. Um, did you have to like? There's another. This is sort of just as an aside, but we see replicants. There's a scene where a replicant's born, and Jared Leto like kills that poor replicant.
Yes.
Did you have conversations about, okay, before replicants are born, what color is their skin? Like before they're totally animated or turned on or what?
Okay. Well, I remember we had a test. Now, so our practical effects, Gerd, he's remarkable. I mean, he is remarkable. And we had the whole effects and visual effects were incredible. Paul Lambert, but Gerd, who's our practical effects from Germany. I mean, they are exquisite because they did a test. We all went, and it was going to be the dropping of the stunt woman through this sack. And what they used for the fluid became this big, I love these conversations we'll end up in for a week. What should it be? What it actually was, and I remember this, was thinking, what are we going to use? Because I did this on Mimic where we used this syrup from the UK, Lyle's syrup, which is quite gold. And I thought, are we going to have to layer, like put this all over this poor girl and it's sticky? No, somebody came up with this fluid that you use for doing, I guess, a scan or some kind of pregnancy ultrasound. The jelly they use, that's what it was. And whoever thought of that, genius. Maybe it was Gerd. So that was the test. And it made the skin a little bit yellow. I remember that. And it was a big concern because we had to check with the young lady to make sure the color of her hair wouldn't turn color and that she would go into the sack and that she was able to breathe. And they had a tube and she would slide through. And there's Jared with his lenses and he can't see because we piggybacked them. I remember the day thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? And Jared with 2 pairs of contact lenses, he couldn't see a thing. And this girl coming through. And it was kind of a remarkable moment with all of us on set. It was an incredible day. But yeah, we tested it one time and it worked. And it was when every department works beautifully in sync. And it only happens, I don't know, maybe in my career, half a dozen times where everybody knew what they were doing and everyone was given the privilege and the honor and respect of doing what, instead of people asking or telling people what to do, we all did what we do. I did Jared's makeup. We put that thing on his neck. I never loved it, by the way. The light, but we still had to do it. We had to do that. We had the girl, all my team, everybody was in there. Jared was delightful. He really was. And he was totally blind and, walking him to the set. But every department did what they're passionate about doing and what they're good at. And nobody interfered. And that for me was a rare moment in the business that you think this is why we do what we do.
Well, and it's such a staggering achievement. Now, I'd love to ask also, when you work with somebody like Jared and then you do like Blade Runner 2049 where he can't see, but then you go back and you work for like John Lee Hancock doing the little things where he gets to play and when you work with an actor again, and you have done that so many times, do you have a different experience working with an actor based on the material and the kind of movie it is, or is it pretty much the same for you when you're working with an actor?
Well, it's interesting because Jared, I mean, I sort of knew I'd work with him again. I don't know why. I think I thought of it as a dare because I felt like we'd accomplished this thing in Blade Runner as Wallace. And when little things came up, somebody called me and said, would you be interested? And it's at Warner Brothers and et cetera, et cetera. And I just finished Dune and I went right to Warner Brothers and I met John Lee. What an incredible guy. He's a great writer, very nice man. And Mark Johnson, like producer, a real producer, right? And Mike Drake, and they asked if I would work on the film and they told Jared, and I went up to meet Jared and it was really nice because I was a little worried about it because I know with Jared that you have to work at a certain level for him. I don't always agree with it, and I'm not going to make excuses. I don't think it's always the right thing for everybody. But that's how he works. And he makes it perfectly clear how he's going to work. And I thought, I'm okay with that because I've had the experience from Blade Runner.
Sure.
And I will say, when I went up to see Jared, he walked right in. He walked right up to me and he said, Donald, it's so good to see you. Gave me a hug and said, I'm so happy you're doing this. And I thought, for him, that's more than you're going to get. That's a lot for him. And we talked and he brought me in to look at things. And we had not that different an experience, other than it was maybe more involved because we ended up doing lenses again, which I didn't think we would do. And he was not, I was surprised he wasn't so open to the lenses after Blade Runner, but I think it was my personal, I'm going to get him back for putting me through those blind lenses, that I'll put him in another pair of lenses. But you know what? He was a delight as well. And the character made me strangely laugh. We changed the nose at the very last minute, as the way Jared will. He will say, you know what? It's not quite big enough. And my great friend and colleague, Lube Larson, who worked with me, and I brought him on Dune to do an amazing makeup. I just said, Lube, like, please, you got to do this for me, because Jared will see the nose. He will know it needs to be fixed. He'll see something. And I respect that he has that eye. And so I think the little things was actually kind of a great experience. And we were, I thought it was a great experience to try a different makeup that for a lot of things on the film, it stood out. I thought he was transformative in a great part, actually. I thought he was great in the part.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed watching him, and he made me laugh. There was something, and the things he says, and we did them in an hour and a half. And I felt like, do you know what? We did a great job. I'm really proud of it. I was proud to be on the shortlisted for it. Mark Neiman working with me, top prosthetics, makeup, we just two of us doing that makeup in an hour and 25 minutes was pretty great.
Yeah.
I have to say so. And,
well, I'm curious also, when you're working with the same actors across different kinds of movies, like with Jake Gyllenhaal, you go from Prisoners to Nightcrawler to Mysterio in Spider-Man Far From Home. Do you, as a makeup artist with these actors, do you come up with different approaches to each film based on the subject matter? Like, does Jake Gyllenhaal have to look more perfect when he's in a Marvel movie as opposed to Nightcrawler?
Yeah. Well, it's great because I think it was very hard on Spider-Man. I'd never worked on one. I mean, until now in the Marvel world, I think you have to understand what it is and take it for what it is and respect. I mean, it's like you talked earlier about genres and things, and I like genre films as well. I think you have to acknowledge what it is. Sure. And not be contentious and be precious. Oh, but I'm not doing that. Well, whatever. I did say when I met, when we saw that first costume fitting with the cape and everything, it's all quite extraordinary.
What a great costume, too.
It was it was great. And they are great. I mean, Anna Shepherd, you think the ability of all the people to also modify what they do from where they've come from on different films and modify. We can all do it. We're creative. But I looked at Jake and I said, you know what, for this, they were nervous, the beard, the hair, is it too big? Like, no. Everybody stop it. There's too many people talking. Just put the costume on and look at them. I don't know when the business got where everybody says, let's decide the makeup before the costume goes on, but that was happening.
Right.
I will say that. It was happening. And I was a bit kind of, really? And went to the costume fitting and saw the costume. And I said to Jake, okay, this is what it is. We don't do anything. You just look great. You get bronzed up. You get perfect hair. That perfect beard, we're going to brush and put some stuff in it. You look phenomenal. You're wearing a pair of skin tight things with a cape. Everybody's looking at you. You look great. What are we doing here? Like, that's what it is. And I think it's something only Laurence Olivier could do. You have to be a tremendous actor to do it.
Yes.
I've done this. If you're not a tremendous actor, it's a flop. But I thought, and I kept saying, look at all those movies. Laurence Olivier did it. Peter O'Toole did it. You can do this. And Jake did it with big hair and a beard and a little bit of bronzer.
Very well,
in
by
a
the way.
great costume.
So
Very
good.
well.
Well, now that
And then Nightcrawler, you do. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say Nightcrawler, man. Talk about. I mean, you don't know if he's on drugs, if he's manic, if he's insane. But again, what you did there was talk about a great performance inhabiting that role. Do you have conversations with Jake about what he's like? He wants to be sweatier than normal, or he's like taking too much Adderall. Like from his process in his own mind, because he had to know where he was coming from. Like, is he crazy? What's his deal? And then does he work with you to come up with that?
Well, no, he's fantastic. I mean, I couldn't ask for a better partner. I mean, he's someone I love him. I mean, I love him. I really mean that sincerely, because the people you work with are not necessarily your friends. I think that's a common. We all know that. It's a good thing. We can't mix it up. Some people get mixed up. I don't get mixed up. Jake's a friend. He's also an actor I really admire. I think as an artist, I really admire him and his talent. And I think it's kind of exquisite. But I kind of admire that he's sort of old school. I always said he's the genuine article ever since I met him. But there are times I can say to him, listen, I'm not feeling that. And he will listen. I think what was important in Nightcrawler, they were worried about the way he looked because he lost some weight. And I really contoured and sculpted him and gave him that funny yellowish color. But I'd always made up in my mind, I don't know what made me think it driving to work one day, he's never sweaty. He will never perspire in this movie. He's going to be sticky and sickly and oily. He is never going to sweat. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
Because sweating is a kind of an emotion, reaction. And he's not fearful. He's not scared. He's creepy. And Jake agreed. And Dan Gilroy, who, I mean, do you get a better writer than Dan Gilroy? I don't think so. And this perfect movie. It was perfect for me. And there we were in LA shooting this movie. And I had the most incredible time. I loved it. I loved everything about it. And the character, the hearing him say it, and Riz Ahmed in his first American film, and all those wonderful people. And Dan Gilroy with the script, I still think is one of the best things I've ever read. Well, maybe in the top 3 I've ever read, ever in my career. And Jake being better than anything. It's like tour de force, people say it was. And we had a great time in that makeup. But Jen Fox, the producer, did say to me, the second or third day we were shooting over by Sunset Junction. She was like, Don, can you come here for a second? She goes, Jake looks really bad. I mean, he looks bad. I went, yeah, but isn't that what we want? And Jake said, do it. Let's do it. We're going to commit and do it. But I know there was a little bit of anxiety and hesitation because he's Jake Gyllenhaal. But that's the difference. That's the ability of Jake to say, you know what, but I want to do this. And I think we should. And it worked, I think, very well. And I'm happy with the outcome. But I know they were nervous about it. And some people were, behind Video Village having an opinion, going all those dark circles. But it was an incredible time. And I missed it. Yeah, it was incredible.
Well, I would be remiss. Obviously, Dune is one of the most eagerly awaited films for me in years. But you have many titles on Dune. According to the IMDb, hair department head, makeup and hair designer, makeup department head, and the prosthetics designer. And the thing with Dune, for those people who don't know, you basically have 3 different factions of people. You have the Harkonnens, the villains. You have the Atreides, who are the good guys. And then, of course, you have the Fremen. And the Fremen are the dwellers on Arrakis, Dune, the indigenous people, as it were, if you want to call them that, or people that moved there and became indigenous. Then you've, of course, got Stellan Skarsgård, who is playing Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, that if you remember, Kenneth McMillan played him in David Lynch's Dune, obviously, and as Jose Ferrer said, the flying fat man in that movie.
Right.
I gotta know, man. Like when you started it on Dune, you worked on Blade Runner 2049, you worked on Prisoners, you worked on
Mhm.
Sicario, you already have a great relationship with Denis Villeneuve. But was this the biggest challenge of your career? And
Yeah,
where did you
yeah.
start? Where did you start? Did you read the books? Did you just read the script? Did you look at production design
Well,
work? Where do you, as a makeup person, start on a movie like Dune?
I did start to read the book, and then I stopped.
Hmm.
And then I started to, because the same thing happened on Blade Runner, where I watched Blade Runner, which is one of my favorite films.
Mm-hmm.
And I've used it for reference for many, many films way back, even Captain Power. Um, so I stopped watching Blade Runner when I worked on Blade Runner. And I thought, no, I'm not getting into this. I'm not getting muddled here, confusing it. And I did the same thing with Dune because I knew Denis would throw a couple of curveballs at me. And so, and a lot of people I think too were mixing it up. When I first read it, I was scared, but not in the same way I was on Blade Runner, because I felt I climbed that mountain. I'm the only person apart from Patrice to have a relationship with Denis, for multiple films. And Patrice Vermette, who's such a wonderful production designer, I just felt like we were already like on the right track because I knew Denis from other films. I knew Patrice. And gradually I thought this will be, Denis wants me to do this and putting me in charge. So I can do what I need to do. And I go to him and report what I'm thinking, and this is what's coming up. And he listens, and I get a sense pretty early on. I kind of know what not to show him, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And I do kind of mock-ups. We do Photoshop, we do tests on everybody. Same thing with Blade Runner. Every extra, every group of people, I do a makeup, and I do mostly hands-on. Um, with Dune, we decided I would run the hair and makeup and prosthetics because I think I know maybe what he'd be looking for, and also to take all the extra work out of it. And it's no offense to other people who run those departments exclusively, other than I work a really specific way, and so does he. And then the marriage of putting me with, I mean, with Jackie, I mean, Jacqueline and Bob, and putting us was so, it was harmonious. Everything just worked. It just all worked. We could have a meeting, the Baron. I mean, so without going, I mean, I know we're not saying a lot about Dune right now till next month, but I think it is safe to say it was a very well matched group of people. And it is like matchmaking. It's a bit like a Yentl, right? Trying to figure out and put
Yep.
it, and then finding my team, which was not easy. Getting my team and who can do this and who will do that. And the Baron it was on my mind. I had lots of ideas, but I didn't know if I could say too much and what we can and what we can't. And is it going to be, it was a number of possibilities, is what I can say to you. And I'd love to say more when we
Yeah.
can, but it was 3 or 4 things.
I think though what I'd be curious about from a technical standpoint, when you're dealing with obviously
Yes.
we know that there's 3 different factions of people. And when you're doing something like that from a makeup standpoint, do you go and choose, like for instance, say the Atreides, you're only going to use a certain foundation on them, like their skin
Yeah.
pallor
Yeah.
looks a certain way? And did you
Yeah.
for the Fremen, cooked by the sun, so then you go to a different makeup?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, is that something? Yeah, that I'm curious about, just from a technical standpoint, to create a look for
Yeah.
characters. Do you ever do that? Do you mix and match in terms of the actual?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we decided quite early on, for instance, I mean, the Sardaukar were a specific thing,
Right.
and Denis. So what I send mood boards. He sends mood boards, and they're always different. But we kind of come together, and then I go see what costume we're doing, and they see what I'm doing. But I love the question, because the one thing I wanted to add about Dune particularly was, when you're working with something so established that people have in their mind's eye what things will look like, we have a bit of a twist on it. So that's a whole other thing. But sometimes when you're reading it, you think, well, I can make this interesting, where the subtlest of changes, people not shaving,
Right.
people with a darker neck skin tone. The hardest thing was the fact that we shot out of sequence, as you do on films, as you know, but also going to hot climate in certain countries, that people's skin tones in the Atreides, for instance, can't change color because they're your principal actors that come from somewhere else.
Oh, yes.
And that was preoccupation. I just kept thinking, how do I keep, and I went to Denise saying, we got to talk about this, because how do you keep Jessica and Paul and everybody, so our main royal family, so to speak, can't be shooting the exteriors in the Middle East before we do the battle.
Go back to Caladan.
So, you know, my level back to, yeah. So I think that's a huge factor. A lot of people in the world of going, they would never think of it, but actually when you do think of it, going, oh my God, the makeup, how do we keep her looking like this regal, the wife of Duke Leto? How do we do that? So there were a lot of challenges that are quite basic makeup, but it's bigger than that. And as far as the Fremen, I mean, we came up with things, little tattoos and different things that were, Fremen, and lots of Photoshop of every actor in possible looks. And we narrowed it down to like this for Javier Bardem or for Stellan. And we honed in on people pretty quickly.
Right. Now, I have to ask this question. In the original Dune, the David Lynch version from '84, there was I don't know if it's true or not, but an effects artist apparently went insane because they had to go in and color the blue eyes of the Fremen. They had to do it by hand, frame to frame to frame. Okay. Obviously, I think one of the great questions, is that just something they did in CG? Or did you actually have to figure out a way to practically, I mean, I don't know. Did you do that practically or did you do it by CG in terms of the blue eyes of the Fremen?
I don't think I'm allowed to say that right now.
Okay, I understand.
I really couldn't. But
No. Let's keep it. You know what? That'll just be something I'll be curious to see.
I'm happy to tell at a later date.
Sure.
But we'll say this. It is, for people listening who are interested, it's one of the things now in the overall makeup and costume you do have to think about whilst you're preparing what you're doing. So I don't know, Zendaya, or what you're doing as a neutral eyeshadow or whatever, of what the eye color could be. So it's a whole new dimension. Even for me, as I'm learning, I'm getting more savvy. But but I mean, once the movie's out in October, we'll talk more, I hope, because I'd love to share some of that with you. It was really kind of a great experience.
Yeah, I would love to know, because I was like, would they make green screen contact lenses? Just like, what would they do? Because I mean,
funny you should say that, because for BladeRunner, for Anna, for Joy, we actually did do, and I wished I'd kept them. We made green screen lenses, which still aren't used widely. I don't know why, because we weren't sure what color we would go with that. It ended up being quite a dark purple, purple black, but we made them in green, but it freaked everybody out because it looked like a lizard. And I think it was very hard for people to imagine that we could change those eyes very easily, but I think you had to see the actual dark eye color. So that's it.
Fascinating. Now I got to ask you, I don't really have the body to wear his clothes. I'd have to work out every day and eat right and not drink. I'm a huge Tom Ford fan. And I have to ask. I mean, I got to see him speak. I went and saw Nocturnal Animals at a screening at the Hollywood Film School because he was going to be there to talk. And I think a single man, I've never seen a movie where, even more so than a Ridley Scott film, where every frame was just exquisite. And what was it like when you're working for someone like Tom Ford, obviously who's in the fashion industry? Was there more pressure on you doing that film?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was the one film where I tried, I mean, full disclosure, I tried everything to get out of it. I was terrified. I just thought, what have I done? I got to go work on something else. I went to meet Tom Ford in London, I was finishing Bond, Spectre, and I got a call. Barbara Broccoli from Bond had recommended me to Tom, and Jake was happens to be in it. But Barbara Broccoli recommended me to Tom Ford, which is very nice of her. And I went to meet Tom Ford at the Tom Ford Fashion Empire in London. Do you remember the TV show Ugly Betty?
Oh, of course.
Do you remember? That's how I felt. I went to Tom Ford's head office, and I went to this office going, "Oh, I'm Ugly Betty." I went to this office with the TF and the big doors, like the Wizard of Oz. TF here. These huge, big brown mahogany doors in London, somewhere in central London. And I went to this meeting. And I remember going in the navy jacket, quite conservative, preppy, thinking, God, Tom Ford, how about that? And I go there and everybody looks the same and they're all skinny and everybody's got the same makeup, the boys and the girls. Everybody's tall, everybody's in a black suit. And I thought, I am Ugly Betty. This is what's happened. And I'm sitting there, oh, Mr. Mowat, would you like a coffee? Would you like a water? Yes, of course. And I'm sitting there watching all these people and thinking, what have I done? This is the biggest mistake of my life. I can't do this job. And then I met Tom Ford, who he was just wonderful. And Tom was great because his enthusiasm. And as I walked in, he kind of eyeballed me. And I thought, well, screw that. I'll eyeball him. And he kind of looked me over and checked my hair and my skin. And I thought I did the same. I thought I can do that too. And what was so wonderfully refreshing about him is that he said, now just let me explain what this is. And he showed me on his laptop a visual presentation of maybe 35 photographs just sliding along on this iPad, just like water. And he just kind of swiped over them. And it was every character, every scene in the film practically, with photographs that would be what would become Amy Adams or Jake Gyllenhaal or Michael Shannon. It was astonishing how he presented it. And he asked me if I would work on the film. And I said, I'll think about it. And I felt this sort of, I know what this is and it'll be difficult, but I can do it. And I did. I loved working on the film and I'm so grateful to him. And he was very nice to me. And because it could be, he's an architect really. Mm-hmm. And he's into the makeup and hair, hugely into it. And he will walk in the trailer and get involved. And it's not for everybody, but I really, I thought he was remarkable. And he's a very nice man. Very nice man.
Well,
Seamus McGarvey shot it.
It's good to hear that. Now, I've got to ask you, obviously, something else. Obviously, we'll stay away from any kind of spoilers. But you've now worked in the Marvel Universe. You're working on it. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a huge fanatical Moon Knight fan. And as we talked about before we started, there's different incarnations of the character of Moon Knight as we've gone along, and they've really sort of moved into more of a the character in the comics, at least, is crazy. If they went he always had multiple personalities, but they were controlled, and then he got crazier as the years went by. But I'm really curious. Obviously, having worked with Oscar Isaac before, mm-hmm. I would assume. Did you go back when you start on a comic book property? I mean, like Mysterio has had one look throughout the years, but Moon Knight has had many different incarnations. Did you ever go back and look at the comics over the years, like how Moon Knight was presented? Because sometimes he's dressed with a top hat and a natty white suit, and other times he was much more of a Batman character. Did you do that kind of research?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm research crazy. I mean, I hashtag that because I do need to say that I think I'm very aware of it when, a character is eccentric or has something, a mental illness, that it's really, that I'm aware of it's delicate if a character split person. I was finding myself being very sensitive to it because it's been a concern of mine during COVID, and I work with a lot of young people within BAFTA and South Central, where I thought, it is a thing where people are crazy. There's a lot of anxiety and paranoia. So I've been very careful in how I sort of thought about it. But I did I like Moon Knight because I started to look up a few things and I didn't know the comics at all. I mean, full transparency, I didn't know. My partner, he knows all that stuff. So I'll call him and say, what's up with that? Is it this? And I look it up. But what's interesting when you research things is that everybody turns up now on the internet with the same research, which is so boring. When we used to go to the library, people turned up with their own research. And now it's the same Google images from the Getty or whatever.
Yep.
But I did find a couple of comic books, and they struck me. I hate it. But I did find a couple of comic books that I wanted to show Oscar. There were a couple of things I thought were interesting. And I love that you can say to somebody like Oscar, who's one of our great actors of our time, was using other examples. And an example I kept using was about paranoia, mental illness, schizophrenia, was Roman Polanski's The Tenant, is something I kept thinking about.
Such a great film.
And it's at a different level, right? It's at a very different level. It's at a hyper hysterical different. I know it's not in the same vein as a Disney Marvel, but there is elements of it. And I think that was something, and I went to Oscar saying, but so it's very interesting that we have recognized that. And the character has a couple of looks that are not far off, but there's certainly elements of it. And I kept looking to that, and Spider, Ray Fiennes, films that I thought were very deep and really demonstrated thoughts about mental illness and paranoia and schizophrenia. So, I think it's part of our job to be fair and delicate and sensitive of how we present it. And I'm not familiar with it was very helpful for me. And I've learned a lot about it, because it wasn't until I watched, and just hear me on this for 1 second, Queer as Folk was the first show I ever watched years after it was on television that really I understood.
Was this the original British version
books.
Or the American version?
The American version, because it wasn't until their latter season where they get into a character who writes a comic book. And I found it very touching that he'd had PTSD and he wrote a comic book character with his friend that had been gay bashed. And I think there's something now I'm missing. I remember being a little kid loving Spider-Man, and I loved it. The cartoon, dark and too dark for a little kid. I mean, you're 5 or 6 watching that Saturday morning. What the hell? I mean, it's dark. But I think working on Moon Knight has given me this sort of renewed interest, and how I kind of undervalued some of the comic book superhero world is. I don't look down on it the way some people are really not nice about it, because I think there's a lot in these characters that we can learn from. And it's very sensitive as a kid when I go back going, but why did I like that so much? What attracted me to these secret characters? There's always a secret. There's always something. There's a power. And it's been very interesting for me to work on this.
Well, one of the things, too, about something like Moon Knight, first of all, the fact that you just cited a David Cronenberg film and a Roman Polanski movie as inspiration for your makeup work in Moon Knight is all I need to know to be very, very excited about this show. But one of the things I love about Moon Knight is at first, Moon Knight was a very noir character. And there was literally femme fatales. And then it came out of, he was a horror character, too. You literally had the Werewolf by Night was where Moon Knight came out of, and then Werewolf by Night participated in the original Moon Knight series. And then he went the other way and was more crazy, like a Joker or personality disorder and all that. So the character of Moon Knight has gone through many different iterations in terms of different genres. And it mixes and matches all. And the fact that you go and you look for things, I mean, for me, hearing that you look for those kinds of inspirations for your work when you go and look at movies like The Tenant and you look at something like Spider is exciting to hear. And I think, that's the kind of thing you want from any of your collaborators, and especially when Moon Knight's mental disposition is such a big part of the character, and to go back and look at these. I mean, what Roman Polanski himself, because he's the lead in The Tenant, and then also Ray Fiennes in Spider-Man. In Spider, not Spider-Man. It's just great to hear that that's where you go. I mean, this is why you get hired. This is why actors want to work with you over and over and over again. And it's not something I think that should be ever. This is the reason. This is what you want from your collaborators. Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, did you have to come to grips with, I mean, obviously you've done a lot of work on whether it was Bond, now science fiction films with directors, or something like Sicario. You know, you've dealt with humanity in crisis. Have you ever wanted to go back and do like some period piece where you just get to make everybody look beautiful all the time? Or do you like where you're at?
I like where I'm at. When I was younger, I loved working, especially in television, on period pieces. I loved it. I thought it was the best, doing period makeup. Exciting. It's beautiful. It's usually beautiful, not always, but I loved it. And I really thought I excelled in it. You kind of, especially in the TV world, remember the miniseries, the network mini, and we were doing 40s, and it was great fun. I love the 30s personally, but no, I'll tell you why. Well, twofold. If you're working with a certain type of person and you're doing a period film, you're going to do beautiful work if you have the right designers, costume, hair, makeup, everything. But then you're going to work on something where you're not going to have a lot to say. You're just going to be an employee doing the makeup, which has happened on some films. And I think that would depress, or it's a style of period that I don't think is real or interesting. Stylized is stylized, like The Lovely is beautiful. That was beautiful. But then there's a period where you think, but that's not really period. And whatever, or it's got a movie star who's going to look the way they want to look. That's not interesting to me. But I think, to be fair, what really is that I'd rather do something that's not been done. I want to create a new character. I want something that's based in reality, well, whatever it is. But I mean, doing a period piece, I love, Christine Blundell's work in Mr. Turner is beyond staggering. I mean, the way what they've done with Timothy Spall, the makeup, the hair is extraordinary. No one does it like she does. It is brilliant, but it's period recreation and character work, topsy-turvy, brilliant. But it's not really my world. And I think the period thing now, for me, I don't think it's as original, or for me, I mean, other people want to do it, but I'm not lined up to do it. Not really. No.
Well, it's interesting to me too. Like, you worked we haven't really talked about your relationship with Mark Wahlberg. You worked on a lot of films with Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah.
And, all the way back to David O. Russell on Three Kings, which that had to be a crazy shoot. But
yes.
When you have a relationship, like Mark Wahlberg is a guy where, his looks don't change a lot in his films. And I really like Mark Wahlberg as a performer. I think one of the great performances of the modern era is his performance in The Departed. I mean, the guy just
absolutely.
What a great turn. I mean, and the fact that he came in and played a supporting role when he was starring in movies, obviously he has no problem when he knows who he's working with. He comes in and says, "Yeah, man, I want to be a part of this movie," and he just crushed in something like that. How do you, with a relationship like that, how do you keep it fresh when you have a long-term relationship with an actor? Is it about the actor himself, or is it always about the character they're playing?
I think in that case, what I love about Mark, and we're still great friends, and he's, family to me, and we stay in touch. And I think he's a personality. He's a wonderful actor. He's very misunderstood. I know him. I don't know. Maybe it's pompous and presumptuous to say I know him probably, well, better than most people, because we did 18 films together. I've known him since we were both very young. I love him. I think that he's became a sort of a personality, this kind of larger than life, which he wanted. And I loved working on certain films with him. And there were other films with him I didn't enjoy because I felt I was a bit wasted. I love to be working and doing interesting things. The Fighter was a great experience because I did everybody,
Right.
and Christian and Amy, and so I loved it, and the sisters, and Mark loved that I loved it. He loved that I was busy. He was secondary to me in that film, even though he had lots of things going on makeup wise, and I'm proud of the film. But Mark was a great producer, and I really respected that. And he worked on a few things with Jake, like this Joe Bell, a recent thing that Jake produced. So I really loved that kind of relationship. And then Prisoners to some extent. But I think Mark is in films that, for me, as you said, his look doesn't change. It became the same thing. It was more being friends and working with people you know and like, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I mean, it's like contemporary clothes. It's a T-shirt.
Right.
And I think Mark is an extraordinary human being, what he's done and this empire he's built. But I think we went slightly different paths, and I'm older. But we got together not that long ago, and it's really kind of nice that we just talk like we've still always worked together. And it's actually been over 10 years that I haven't worked with him.
Wow.
And after all those films, and I left working with him. Yeah, it's over 10 years. Mm-hmm. I did reshoots for something, and he'd asked me to do Joe Bell, which I couldn't. We were doing Dune. But I saw him, and we had lunch not that long ago. And it's funny because I left working with Mark to work with Daniel Craig.
Right. Well, it's
So,
not like you've been a slouch. I mean, your filmography, you've worked on these huge monster projects, and I love the fact that you get to be multidisciplinary, whether it's prosthetics and overseeing hair and makeup. I mean, obviously someone just talking to you in the last hour and a half, I'm like, wow. I mean, anybody who is making a film would be lucky to have you working with them. So clearly, this is amazing. But, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, sir. This has been an incredible conversation, and I can't thank you enough. I mean, I would keep you here for hours.
You're very easy. You're very easy to talk with and speak with and do this. And I loved your questions, and I really appreciate you having me. And I can't stress enough. It's very nice that people do want to talk about films and ideas and movies and looks. And it's exciting to me still, after all these years, that we still enjoy and engage and are excited about things like that. So I thank you for that.
Oh, well, I mean, that's, I've been in love with film my whole life, and film as an art form and film as a business, and mostly watching movies. But I think it's something that, in a way, with all of the content that gets produced, everything is in one ear and out the other. And I don't ever want to lose the idea that filmmaking is the culmination of the collaboration of so many different talented people from disparate disciplines that come together to create something that hopefully is timeless, and it remains timeless. And that makeup artists pioneered the look of all the way back to the silent era. It was makeup artists themselves were at the front lines of creating the people that we worship and that we dream about. And if it wasn't for our talented makeup artists, man, half the images that Hollywood is associated with would not look the way they look. So
it's something, just to add to that, I just think there's a lot of films over the years, people sometimes when they don't see, there's certain things you see are obvious. You get a brilliant costume design, especially the period pieces where people awe and they're, the splendor of gowns and dresses and incredible costumes people see. And the thing with the makeup is that the greatest makeup is often something you don't see.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hidden. It's a bit of a painful journey, because sometimes you think, but they have no idea what we did. And that's kind of, you feel great. And other times you feel like, well, nobody knows that, or they don't realize, or they see an actor before they come in and after, and then they kind of go, oh my God, I didn't realize they do all that to you. And that's the magic and mystique of it. But there is something that goes missing a little bit, where we only see larger than life. And I've sort of liked to look at films where I'll see something that's kind of incredible, There was a makeup on Tilda Swinton. I think Kira Panchenko did, on not a great film called Trainwreck or something. But the makeup on Tilda Swinton was brilliant. It was a genius makeup, but no one could see it for what it was because it wasn't a big prosthetic makeup or elaborate. But if you look at Tilda Swinton, it'll take you a minute to recognize her and go, that's really good. And I think that that's the part of the craft I feel needs a little bit more things like this for people to see the work that's involved, or say, check out Tilda Swinton and look at her in that film. It's extraordinary. And yet it's so simple what they did.
Well, Donald Mowat, I cannot thank you enough for appearing on the Designing Hollywood podcast. I want to thank you for your time. For those of you who are looking for more of Donald's work, you can see it upcoming in Dune. And obviously for me, and I'm sure a lot of all of you out there listening, the Moon Knight television series. It's just phenomenal, and I just can't thank you enough for your time for today's podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being so nice and generous, and everybody listening. Thank you so much.
And thank you to our sponsor, the United American Costume Company, established in 1977 by legendary costumer and costume designer Luster Bayless. Luster wanted to form a company independent from the studios that would provide quality wardrobe for affordable prices and never lose sight of the notion that we as costumers are filmmakers. Follow me, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, on Twitter at BurnettRM, on Instagram at Robert Meyer Burnett, and on my own YouTube channel, The Burnett Work. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in. Until next time.